Have you ever said, I think we could build our own software and it'd be a lot better than what we're using now? Because the software company we're using now, they suck. They're not innovating. They're not adding to the software. Their design sucks. They don't have the features I need. If only I had the features I need, man, we could grow this company so much faster. It's the bottleneck. We could do this. We could find some contractors to build this software, and we could do it a lot better. I want to persuade you that this is a horrible, horrible idea. So if you've been on the fence about doing this, let me try to persuade you before you go and do it. I want to burn a saying into your brain. The saying is, I'll give you 80% and I'll bill you the 20% the rest of your life. I learned that saying when I worked for a software company from like 20 to 23, 20 to 24 years old. That's really the only job I've ever had. And that was a saying, we weren't a consulting company, we were in decision support. It's kind of like what they call AI now. And the idea, I don't know why I was hearing that in that business, but we worked with a bunch of consultants. And the idea was that if you engaged with a consultant, they'd get you really close to what you want. They'd give you that 80%, but you will pay for the rest of your life forever to get to that next 20% where the software is just right. I believe that. I've been in the software industry for a long time. I believe that. It's way more expensive to build software than you think it is. It's way more time consuming. Tons of design and planning have to go into it from the beginning. If you get it wrong in the beginning, you'll pay for it for the rest of your life. There could come a point where it's like, it's not even worth trying to rework the stuff we got wrong in the beginning. I have 3 words for you that should keep you up every night if you have your own software: security, redundancy, data loss. So let's do security. When you're building your software and you're contracting it out to somebody, how do you know it's being built in the right way that's not going to eventually get hacked? You're not eventually going to get in a ransom situation where you've got to give Bitcoin to somebody to get access to your software again, or they don't take all your customer data out of it and then you're in a lawsuit with all your customers, or there's a class action suit against you, or whatever the scenario might be. Or they just delete your database. That falls into the data loss one. What about redundancy? You have decided to host your system somewhere that's fairly affordable and then they go offline. When you're doing it yourself, you probably can't afford to have a redundant copy of your system running in a data center in Texas, a data center in Chicago, or a data center in Virginia, where if one data center goes down, it falls over to the other data center. And then when it falls over, like, how do you sync back up the data? Like, how do you deal with all the database stuff to make sure you can then fall back over to the Virginia location? Because you're going to have to pay consultants to do all that work. Database people at $200+ an hour. Redundancy is kind of a big deal because downtime's kind of a big deal. How do you deal with data loss? Like, what? I mean, this one should scare you more than anything. What if you lose some data? What if somebody screws up in the database, or they put a bug in the system and that bug deletes data? But it doesn't delete data where you know today. It deletes data over 6 months. And then your backups are only running, you're only maintaining backups for are you even maintaining backups in the first place? Like, did you think of all that? Are you paying for all that? Are you storing backups in Colorado and in Texas that are offsite outside your data center? But let's go back to the 6-month slow loss of data. So you are actually backing up your data and you're maintaining your backups for 90 days for whatever reason. But now you've lost data for 6 months. You just now discovered it. You've just lost 3 months of data you can never recover. How do you fix that problem? There are so many things. I give you those 3 examples to say there are so many things that if you don't live in this world and you don't think about it every minute of your life, and you don't hire $150,000 a year people that have been doing this for 10 and 20 years to think about it with you, and many of those people, to be frank, are more than $150,000 a year, then how are you possibly going to build this incredible system that's going to run every aspect of your business and do so for the next 10 to 20 years? It's just more than most people imagine. What people imagine it takes to build a software product and maintain that software product, not over 2 or 3 years, but over 10 years, changing technology. I'll give you an example. When we started our software company in 2010, You couldn't go to Amazon and give them your credit card and get 90 days free on, AWS. You had to actually buy servers or pay thousands of dollars a month for a teeny tiny little server sitting in a rack somewhere. There was no redundancy. It wasn't done for you. When you want to do credit card processing, you couldn't just integrate with Stripe. It was way more complicated than that. Everything we did back in the day was way more complicated. Every technology we used back in the day was gone years later. Like, you would never use that. And so we kept having to change our technologies. Well, that's going to happen at an even faster pace over the next 10 years. So a lot of your expense is like, you think you build it once and then you're good for 10 or 20 years. No, like, it's constantly changing. Everything's constantly changing, where you're having to change things, rewrite things, upgrade things. It never ends. That's what software is about. You might say, well, I'll just offshore this. Okay, but who's the expert that's going to know if the offshore team is building it correctly? How do you know if they designed it correctly, if they're building it correctly? How do you know if you got security holes? How do you know if it's being built in such a way it's going to be slow? I mean, there's so many factors. So, if you're going to use an offshore team, then I'd highly recommend you hire a very experienced software person that's the equivalent of a CTO, so that they can manage all those people. It shouldn't be you. You're too busy. If you're going to design the software, no way. I mean, you're way too busy. You're going to half-ass the design of the software, and you're going to regret lots of decisions later. If you don't fully design it before you hand it to a development team, what you're going to get back is not what you expect, and you just spent all this money, and then you're going to have to spend the money again to fix it. So you have to really design it before you even hand it off. Not just like the interface design. Like, you can't just draw a picture on a sheet of paper and scan it and send it to them. It's like, hey, build me this. Okay, that's just part of it. Like, that's kind of the interface, but how's that interface interact with the other screens? How's that interact with the database? Like, there are so many questions that have to be answered that are more than how's it interface with other screens and with the database. There's way more than that. That's all got to be figured out. Who's going to think through all that stuff? So the person to think through that might be a CTO type individual. Well, what's that person going to cost? I mean, I personally think that's a $200,000 plus role, maybe 150 plus, but like, for me, it's like a $200,000 role. Are you going to do, and I would, you could outsource that role, but I kind of want that role in my office working with us very closely. Are you budgeting for that? If you're saying, well, we could justify all these expenses because they'll eventually help our valuation when we sell our business. Probably not. Probably not. Nobody's going to be confused and say, oh, these guys are a tech-enabled company. This lawn care company, this HVAC company, they're tech-enabled. This is great. No. If you're an HVAC, they're probably going to say, this is actually not good. We're going to rip this out and we're going to install Service Titan or Field Edge or some other software package. Because sophisticated money knows this stuff is a drain on a business, it's a drain on time, and it's a drain on resources to build your own technology. And so it's not going to get you a better valuation. You could say, well, we're only going to build part of it. We're just going to integrate with Salesforce, and we'll just build around Salesforce. That's not cheap. I have known multiple people who have gone down this road and spent millions of dollars. And then maybe right now you're paying your company that you're working with for software, maybe you're paying them 20, 25, 30, 50, $100 a month for a license. When you get into Salesforce and you're building around the Salesforce API and you have to upgrade your licenses to a specific plan so that you can do custom dev around them, every license in your company goes way up in price, like way up in price. So if you're like, man, $30 a month per user is really expensive right now, you're never going to touch Salesforce. Like, they were going to blow your mind when you realize how much you have to pay. And they're great. Unlike the rest of us, they're awesome at taking price increases every year. Or you're like, oh, we'll just use Zapier and we'll just piece together lots of tools. Integrations are horrible. They're horrible. Like, you could get everything right and then your QuickBooks online integration breaks. What happens when QuickBooks doesn't sync with you for a day or two? And you're like, okay, well, you need to write some logic to figure out what didn't get synced and catch up. Like, where are the holes? And then you have other integrations, like maybe into like Survey Monkey, and it breaks or whatever, so you can do your NPS score. Like, okay, well then you got to get another consultant to help you figure that one. It just never ends. So you won't, but you might get everything right in your business around building software. Like you just did a magical job, better than everybody else building it, but you're integrated to 7 other systems. You're gonna have issues. They're gonna change their API. They're gonna say you can't use this API anymore. You got to use this different API. You're gonna have development work around that. They're gonna say, hey, we changed our. I don't want to get too technical here. They changed other things, and you've got to go upgrade your systems to be in compliance with those things within the next 6 months. It just never ends. They've changed something about their security policy. Now you need to go through this audit. You want to integrate. I mean, remember back in the day for us to bring email into our system? No problem. We need to do a $70,000 per year audit with Gmail. No problem. Well, that's just one more expense. It just never ends. And so this stuff doesn't look too terribly bad from the outside. And we're like, you know what? I can just find some people to write me this stuff. It won't be that hard. It's way harder than you think. How many companies do you know that have successfully built a software package that's getting better and better, and they've been using it for a decade? I actually know 0. None. So that's why I would discourage you away from this. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be technical. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try to piece together multiple systems inside your company. It doesn't mean you don't try to do everything you possibly do to get the best technological setup you can get. I just really would suggest you don't build it. I'm afraid it will cost you way more money and time than you imagine, and eventually the project will get scrapped and all that money will be down the drain. This is not a statement to anybody. There is no hidden statement here that I'm making, because I've got friends that have done this. I know other people that have done this. I know people that come from the trades that have started software companies. There is no hidden message here. I have just heard this so many times, and I've known so many people that have tried to go down this road. I've decided that while it might be a very small audience that would ever consider this, it's just worth recording this video in hopes that maybe you have some additional information so you can make the right decision for your company. But there's no hidden message. I'm not calling anybody out. I want to be really clear on that.